Hello and welcome aboard to another episode of the Trendy Express podcast. My name is the Eli Samurai, right alongside my good friend Jacob. We're going to be your conductors for today, and as you can see, we got our makeshift conductor outfits by the looks of our vest and also just a hat. Now, we're going to have these for a few episodes until we get like a proper one in the near future, who knows? And we got a new background, so you'll be seeing this for future episodes. And if you just listen to it, you'll just listen to it. But today we're going to be talking about superheroes and comic books as I teased in our first episode. But before we dive right in, Jacob, why don't you tell us about the origins of comics and superheroes?
Well, it has to be brief because there's so much. But, the earliest one was an unknown called Histoire de M. Vaubois. Did I get that right?
You probably did.
That sounds pretty good, right? In 1837 by Rodolphe Topfer. And it's considered to be the first, but the first one that's more like modern, if you will, was in the 30s. It's a newspaper comic strip by the name of Hugo Hercules. He never wore a traditional super costume in 1902, apparently, but eventually I guess he did. The Silver Age of comics started in 1956, was reimagining, superhero origins. It drove away from fantasy, made things more, realistic, Flash being Barry Allen and not Jay Garrick, although some of it was a little goofy. If you know the Batman Brave and the Bold series, it comes from the comics around that Bronze and Silver Age. It's pretty fun. Marvel started to become a big-time comic studio, however, after they changed from Timely Comics between the late 30s to 1950 and Atlas Comics from 51 to 57, so that's when they got started. The Silver Age comics continued in the 70s with some highlights, including some darker themes, and the comic codes of conduct were created to set specific rules to avoid for young kids and teens who read comics. The 80s was, for indie parody comics to make profit off the superhero tropes, like Daredevil and New Teen Titans. The 90s became the decade for people to buy and collect older comic books. And it was around this time where a comic studio, former Marvel artist, started Image Comics to create violent, gritty, dark comic books to publish for general audiences like Spawn. Then in the 2000s, Marvel began their Ultimate series that was more of a modern take on things. Then in the 2010s, DC Comics launched a New 52 era and their Rebirth era for guys, like Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman or whatever. Some, just a few, there's so many of them, but some iconic comic book artists are, Stan Lee, who's a, co-creator of a lot of Marvel comics. Steve Ditko, who's a co-creator with Stan Lee. Jack Kirby, who worked with both Marvel and DC. Bob Kane, who created Batman. Frank Miller. Jerry Segal and Joe Shuster, Todd McFarlane, Kevin Easton, and Peter Larlin, and there's so many more. And then some iconic superheroes include Superman, the Human Torch, Blue Beetle, Batman, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, X-Men, Thor, the Incredible Hulk, the Punisher, Ghost Rider, Wolverine, the Spider-Man, all the Iron Man, all of them, so many.
Yeah, and that it really is a lot of superheroes right there. But I mean, they have like a historic value to like different types of comic fans out there. Like, I think the biggest ones for superheroes has got to be like Batman and the DC, and then you got like Spider-Man and Marvel.
I know. When I was a kid, that was the biggest one. I was such a big fan of Batman when I was a kid. Also, you have the Submariner written down. It's funny because the only time I've ever heard of the Submariner was like a Family Guy joke. Like they're making fun of him. That's the only time I've ever heard of the Submariner.
Yeah, that was Namor back in the day because he was created in like the 30s with Timely Comics around the time with what's his name again? Captain America.
So is he really just Aquaman but worse?
Really something like that. Well, for Namor, he has like a complicated history, because early days, he was just like a superhero for Atlantis, which might be like a big comparison to DC. And then there was like a few comic issues where he actually was like the villain. Like even recently with the Black Panther Wakanda Forever, that movie, Namor, but he's called Namor because it's like a different origin take on Namor the Submariner, but made him more a little different because I think it's more like Malaysian based than what he was from the comics.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, there's so many other superheroes that are out there. Like I really like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because I got introduced to the cartoons back in the 2010s, and then I found out that they had like a comic book origin from Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. And funny thing about the Ninja Turtles origins, it's just like a parody of Daredevil's origins. Because in Daredevil's origin, Matt Murdock got hit by like a chemical near his face, got gone blind, and then that same canister bounced a few times, hit like a what was it like? It's like a jar, not like a jar, but like at pet stores they had like those like jar thing for like pets.
Yeah, I mean, I know kind of what you're talking about because MODOK has this kind of like casing for his body. Like, I don't know exactly what you call it, but it's supposed to be like for me, like I like MODOK interpretations that are actually like kind of like more body horror and darker. Like there are some MODOK interpretations that are just like he's a silly guy with a big head, and I feel like that kind of undermines how dark his character really is. And in a similar way to how Bane in Batman, right? You know how he has a lot of interpretations that are just like, oh, big guy smashes things. He's basically like their Hulk, and it's really stupid because Bane is actually a very smart character. He figures out
He
Batman's
is.
identity on multiple occasions in multiple different comics and games, all on his own. And I will say the way they wrote him being stupid in the Arkham series was clever, with him taking basically T1 in Origins, which was basically the precursor to what Venom was, and he overdosed on it to the point it permanently damaged his brain. So that's why he's really stupid in the future games. Which that's a good way of writing yourself out of it because the studio that made Origins, WB Montreal, is different than Rocksteady. So they did a good job of writing themselves out of it, but you shouldn't have made him stupid to begin with.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
like stupid Banes, right? So that's the thing, right? That's a big reason why Arkham Origins is one of my favorite pieces of, I guess you could technically call it comic book media because it derives from a lot of comics. Just because it's probably one of my favorite like stories in any piece of comic book media. It's just such a good accumulation of everything. The way you are introduced to every villain. I will say they could have probably done more with the side villains, like Shiva, who has like a lot of history, but it was still really good. And
It's
certainly better than any of the
more
modern attempts
at
like
that Marvel's Avengers game was
was
not.
not.
Yeah.
Right. Neither was that horrible Kill the Justice League
Suicide Squad game.
So.
So
It's
it's
definitely
definitely
got
got
worse.
worse.
Hopefully,
Hopefully,
what's the new
Lego
Lego
Batman game called?
Oh, so it's like Batman Legacy of Dark Knight. But,
Yeah,
That's basically like an Arkham Lego game.
Yeah. But actually, going back to like the Ninja Turtles part, because because that origin part, that's what created the Turtles in the first place. Because the Ninja Turtles went right off the pages and into cartoons and movies, and even for like modern comic books, the Ninja Turtles they actually did a crossover with Batman like a few times before.
Yeah, it's really crazy how many just like, because I'm not like super. I wouldn't call myself super into comics. I haven't really read much, but it's crazy how much media you can find within like a 5-minute search, because the amount of shows, comics, video games, crossovers, movies, all that kind of stuff that you can find for just one character or one set of characters that then branches out to so many different influences. It's like overwhelming. It's so many of them.
Yeah, because no one, I don't think there's much people that could get bored with comics, especially those who are like reading much.
Yeah, if you wanna just go into it, whether it's comics or even just any media based on comic books, there's just so much to choose from. Like literally, you could just keep rifling off different things that have some kind of comic book influence, and you could just never stop if you keep going.
Yeah, and that's what's really cool about superheroes, because they are from the comic books back in the day, and then they're still around to this day. Even one part I really like about comic books, there is, if you go to Universal on Islands of Adventure, when you go to Marvel Superhero City, it's like being inside of a comic book, because the whole area, like where they made all the buildings and stuff, it looks like it's straight from the 90s comics, which is like a really cool thing. And especially the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. I really like that ride because it has like a comic book feel when you go on the ride. It feels like they're part of the adventures with Spider-Man and also meeting the Syndicate 5. Because there's something special about reading comics and adapting those into TV shows or movies, because it's a really big medium.
Yeah. One thing I will say too, I haven't read it myself, but one of my favorite comic book things is and games is Injustice. And if there's a video, I just looked it up. It's Cosmic-xtravaganza, and he has a video of the entire Injustice like story from start to finish. It's a 7-hour and 20-minute long supercut. And if you want something to listen to, I recommend that for sure.
Well, that is all the time we're going to have for today's episode. Thank you very much for joining in another episode of the Trendy Express podcast. Now, I would like to hear from you. What is your favorite comic book or superheroes? Leave it down in the comments. But also, we're going to be talking more on the pop culture. There's going to be so many more guests in the future. And I hope that you can stay with us as we continue our journey into the pop culture world. So be sure to follow us on Instagram at trendyexpress_podcast. We're going to have lots of different content out there, like teasers and different clips like I've done before. There's also going to be a YouTube channel, which you can watch all these episodes on. You can see more of what we're going to be doing in the future, maybe like a second channel in the future, right? we don't know, but there is going to also be just audio versions of our podcast, so then you can listen to it when you go in your car ride. If you just want to listen to us while you sleep, that's all up to you. Thank you once again for checking us out for the Trendy Express podcast. So stay trendy, and we'll see you next time.